Hello, my friend. This is Peggy. I'm so glad you stopped by again just in time. I've finished brewing a fresh pot of tea. Sometimes I sit here, watching the sunlight filter through the branches in my garden, and I ask myself, why is it that some people seem to grow more radiant and peaceful with age, while others carry faces marked by worry and bitterness? At 91, I've come to understand that happiness in old age follows a rather unusual rule. It's nothing like our younger years when we tried to collect more achievements, more money, more attention. Instead, happiness in our later years lives in our ability to let go and to lighten the emotional baggage we carry. Today, I want to gently share with you 10 small secrets, simple ones, but carefully distilled from everything I've learned to help cultivate a calm and settled soul in a life full of change. If you too are searching for a little lightness in your heart, let me pour you a cup of tea and let's begin together. The biggest trap we often set for ourselves over an entire lifetime actually begins with something very small. When we are young, comparison acts like a kind of engine. We look at our friends' success, at our colleagues' houses, at other people's children's report cards, and we use it to pressure ourselves. We tell ourselves we must try harder, become as wealthy as they are, shine as brightly as they do. Back then, we called it ambition. But once we've crossed the other side of life's slope, when our hair has turned gray and our steps have slowed, comparison is no longer an engine. At this stage, it becomes a powerful mental poison. It doesn't help you move forward. It only leaves you bitter about what you should have had. I see many of my friends, even in their years of rest, still scrolling through social media or chatting with others, only to feel a quiet ache inside. They ask themselves, why do those people's children take their parents traveling all the time, while mine don't? Or, why does that old colleague now have such a generous pension and such a comfortable life? Every one of those why questions is like a knife cutting into your peace. You're using someone else's ruler to measure your own life. That makes no sense, does it? How can you feel happy with your own garden when your eyes are always fixed on the greener grass next door? At 91, I've learned to close every door that leads to comparison. I no longer ask, who should I have been, or what should I have had? Instead, each morning when I wake up, see the sunlight slipping through the curtains, and notice Mildred curled up beside me, I ask myself just one question. Peggy, is this life enough for you? And you know what? When the answer is enough, something magical happens. All the bitterness, envy, and regret dissolve like morning mist. Enough does not mean having everything. Enough means cherishing what is already resting in the palms of your hands. So, if you find your heart unsettled by someone else's success, take a deep breath. Ask yourself my question. Is my life, as it is right now, enough to bring me peace? The moment you feel that it is enough, you become the richest person in the world. When you can truly answer that your life is enough, something magical happens. You no longer feel the need to throw every door of your life wide open to the world. You begin to close the doors that are no longer necessary. And that is when your world starts to grow smaller. Many people are afraid of this. They fear that as they grow older, their contact lists will thin out, invitations will stop coming, and their world will shrink. But you know what? At 91, I see it as a blessing. When we're young, we try to expand our lives outward. We want hundreds of acquaintances. We want to be present at every gathering. We want to know every piece of sensational news in the world. But the wider the lake, the shallower the water. At this age, I no longer have the energy or the desire to maintain shallow relationships where people exchange only empty pleasantries. I chose to make my world smaller. Today, my world revolves around just a few close friends, Margaret, Doris, and Helen. That's all. It's enough. We don't sit together to talk about the weather or gossip about other people. We talk about what truly touches the heart, our fears, forgiveness, and the beautiful memories that have nourished our souls over the years. You see, instead of widening my life, I chose to dig deeper into it. I've learned that a quiet afternoon sharing tea and looking into the eyes of someone who truly understands you is far more precious than 10 noisy social gatherings where you have to force a smile and play the role of the cheerful. 1. When your world becomes smaller, the connections that remain grow radiant and resilient like diamonds. Don't be afraid when your circle of friends becomes smaller. Don't be afraid when you no longer know every piece of news out there. Allow your world to shrink so your soul can find stillness. When that happens, you'll notice you're no longer distracted by unnecessary noise. And when the space around you grows quiet enough, you'll discover something even more interesting. You are no longer standing at the center of everyone's attention. When your world becomes smaller and you're no longer standing at the center of all the noise outside, the space around you suddenly grows very quiet. At first, that quiet can feel like a relief. But if you're not careful, it can also lead you to feel as if you no longer matter, or worse, to become lazy with your own life. That's why, even though my world now fits within this one room and a small garden, I always make sure I have at least one thing that reminds me I am still needed. You see, at 91, the greatest enemy isn't illness, it's the comfortable bed. It whispers to me, "Peggy, you're old now. Stay in a little longer. No one is waiting for you. And if it weren't for Mildred, I might have surrendered to that bed a long time ago." Mildred is a very disciplined cat. Every morning at exactly 7:15, not a minute early, not a second late, she jumps onto the bed and begins her complaint song, demanding breakfast. Mildred needs me. She needs my hands to open her food, and she needs my gentle touch after a long night's sleep. That small responsibility forces me to throw back the covers, slip my feet into my slippers, and begin a new day. You don't have to have a cat to feel useful. It could be a small green sprout by the window, waiting for you to water it each morning so it won't wilt. It could be an old friend waiting for a phone call, just so you can listen as they tell stories from long ago. Or it could be a simple task around the house that only you do best. I call this the medicine of meaning. The feeling of being needed even by a small living thing or a fragile plant is a thin but incredibly strong thread that ties us to life. It reminds us that our presence in this world is still making a difference. Don't let yourself drift into a state of indifference toward everything around you. Find a small responsibility, a companion that depends on your care. Because when you nurture another life, you are also watering your own soul. And when you've found a reason to wake up each day, you'll discover a deeper calm within yourself, one that allows you to face even those moments when sadness comes to visit. When your feet have left the bed and your hands have touched the green shoots of life, it doesn't mean your heart will always feel warm and bright. There are days when, no matter how loudly Mildred calls or how beautiful the sunlight is, I still feel my heart weighed down by a sadness I can't quite name. At this age, we often assign ourselves one final role, the role of the strong, clear-minded elder who must always appear cheerful so the children won't worry. We fear that if we show even a hint of sorrow or vulnerability, the younger ones will panic. So we tuck our sadness deep into our wrinkles and offer a strange smile whenever someone asks how we're doing. But my friend, after nearly a century of living, I've learned this: sadness is not weakness. Sometimes, when I sit in my familiar armchair and look at the empty space where Harold once sat, my heart still aches. I miss him. I miss his voice, even his clumsy little habits. And in those moments, I allow myself to cry. I don't hold it back, and I don't scold myself for being sentimental. True happiness is not a constant, radiant smile 24 hours a day. True happiness is having the courage to be honest with your feelings. Don't force yourself to play the role of the cheerful old person when there's a storm inside your heart. If you feel sad today, let that sadness sit down and have tea with you. Be as gentle with yourself as you would be with a child who is quietly sobbing. When you no longer have to strain yourself to hide what you feel, a strange lightness begins to seep into your soul. And it's this honesty that will guide you toward a deeper peace, a place where you can sit alone in silence without feeling afraid or empty. Being honest with your emotions is like a sudden rain shower. It washes away the dust of pretending and leaves the soul with open, quiet space. And it is in that space that you face an important test. Can you truly sit with yourself in peace? I've noticed that many people, not just the young, but even those our age, seem deeply afraid of silence. The moment they step into the house, the television has to be turned on. The moment they sit down, their hands rush to grab the phone. We try to fill every empty space with sound and images, because we're afraid that if things become too quiet, our inner thoughts will start to speak and make us uneasy. But my friend, if you can't tolerate even 10 minutes of silence without some form of distraction, then perhaps you're not yet at peace with yourself. You may still be running away from the one companion who has been with you from the very beginning to the very end of your life. At 91, I cherish silence more than anything else. I love those moments, sitting by the window, doing nothing at all, just watching the sparrows hop along the porch and listening to my own steady breathing. In that quiet, the world is not empty. On the contrary, it is full of small sounds we usually miss. The wind moving through the leaves, the rhythm of our own heartbeat, or the calm presence of Mildred sleeping at my feet. When you truly make peace with silence, you discover a precious truth. Happiness doesn't live in noise, grand events, or applause from the outside world. It lives in the stillness right inside your chest. A person who can sit alone and still feel content, that is a person who is truly free. And when you've found peace within yourself, you'll also gain the clarity to recognize what is truly worth keeping in your life and what has come time to gently let go. When your soul has finally settled into stillness, you begin to see more clearly the things that noise once hid from you. You realize that in the house of your life, there are guests who make you feel warm whenever they visit, but there are also those who leave you feeling drained every time they come by. At 91, I understand one thing very clearly. Our energy is a limited form of currency. We no longer have an ocean of time ahead of us to waste on what doesn't truly matter. And yet, I see many people still forcing themselves to endure exhausting relationships simply because of the words obligation or old ties from the past. Don't do that to yourself. Whether it's a longtime friend who brings nothing but complaints, or even someone close to you who constantly spreads negativity, have the courage to let that relationship step back. Happiness in old age doesn't come from the number of people around you. It comes from being decisive about where your energy goes. You are no longer at an age where you must please everyone or try to fix anyone, and you certainly don't have the time to keep enduring people who weigh down your heart. Allowing draining relationships to leave is not selfish. It is the bare minimum of self-respect for the life you still have ahead of you. Save your precious, limited energy for yourself, for Mildred, or for the people who truly bring light into your soul. And once you've cleared away the relationships that exhaust you, you'll find your shoulders feel much lighter, ready for another important step forward, letting go of the burdens of the past. When you've had the courage to clear away the relationships in your present that drain you, you may notice there is still another kind of burden resting quietly on your shoulders, one just as heavy. These are the ghosts of the past. Old wounds and resentments we've held on to for far too long. Many people believe that forgiveness means admitting the other person was right or accepting what they did as acceptable. That isn't true at all. At this stage of life, deciding who was right or wrong matters far less than protecting the peace of your own mind. I often compare resentment to a large stone you insist on carrying on your back while climbing the final steps of a high mountain. The closer you get to the summit, the more that stone steals your breath, forcing you to stare at the ground instead of noticing the beautiful views all around you. Forgiveness is, in truth, an act of liberation for yourself. It cuts the rope that binds you to old pain. I've learned to forgive the mistakes of others, and just as importantly, to forgive myself. I forgive myself for careless words, for awkward decisions made in my youth, and for all the if-only moments I punished myself with for so many years. To me, happiness in old age means carrying as little emotional luggage as possible. When your shoulders are light because you're no longer entangled in yesterday's stories, you'll walk more easily, see life more deeply, and allow your heart to be moved by simpler joys. And when your shoulders are finally free of the weight of the past, you'll find you have the strength to truly live this moment instead of saving your life for some distant someday. When your shoulders have grown light free from the weight of old stories, your gaze naturally turns forward. But my friend, at this age, forward is no longer a long, endless road like it was when we were 18 or 20. And that's when we begin to notice another sweet trap we've fallen into our whole lives, the trap called someday. End quote. I often hear my friends, and even people 10 or 20 years younger than me, say things like, "When I feel a little healthier, I'll definitely go visit her," or "Once the children are settled and everything is taken care of, then I'll finally be able to rest in peace." Please don't do that to yourself. After 91 years of living, I can tell you a truth that's obvious, yet so easily forgotten. There is no someday. There is only today, the only reality we truly hold in our hands. Our time now is like the final grains of sand in an hourglass. They fall faster than we expect. If a friend suddenly comes to mind, pick up the phone and call them right away. Don't wait for a holiday. If there's a dish you've been longing to taste again, cook it yourself or ask someone to bring it to you this afternoon. Don't wait until the conditions are right, because the truth is, we already have everything we need right now, life and breath. Whenever I catch myself about to postpone a small joy, my personal mantra is this: if not today, then when? That question reminds me that every moment lived with clarity and peace is a privilege not to be wasted. Don't let your life become a chain of unfinished promises. Live fully for this afternoon, for this cup of tea, and for these quiet conversations. Because when you stop waiting for the future, you finally begin to belong to the present. And when you learn to cherish each moment of today, you'll find yourself ready to face the greatest question, the final one, that gently closes a lifetime with kindness. When you know how to live fully today, all external measures lose their meaning. Don't ask yourself whether you were successful or how much you left behind. Ask just one question: was I kind to myself? True happiness in old age is knowing how to forgive your mistakes and love yourself after every storm. If your answer is yes, then you've already lived the most radiant life of all.